All right, so 6 days before Thanksgiving, really feels like winter is trying to get the show started early this year. So we have a storm on the East Coast, storm moving on the West Coast, potential travel disruptor next week for some, and there's some interesting things in the long range. So first, if you haven't yet, please hit that subscribe button, help the channel to grow. But pretty big storm on the East Coast. First snow for many, and for many it was a lot of snow. There are some places in Pennsylvania, New York, New Jersey that got over a foot of snow. Poconos got hit pretty hard. Should be, I would think, an early start to the ski season for them. Storm moving into the West Coast. That is going to bring some mountain snow, possibly measured in feet in the Sierras once it's all said and done. As we head into the weekend, our storm in the east will really start to diminish and move out. Some unsettled weather in New England tomorrow as that pushes out. And then snow moves into the Rockies. As we head into early next week, we might have a weak system over the Great Lakes, might bring a little bit of snow to parts of Wisconsin, maybe Minnesota. And then as we move into the middle part of next week, we see a storm system start to gather across the southern Rockies and the southern part of the central part of the United States. Could bring some snow to the Denver metro area, and then that shifts east on Wednesday and into Thursday. Obviously, very busy travel period coming up here, and there might be just enough cold air to bring a swath of snow from, say, St. Louis over towards Indianapolis, over towards Columbus, Pittsburgh. And as that shifts further east, the low moves off the mid-Atlantic coast, throws some more moisture back into that cold air. And there could be, I say could, we're still obviously a week out at this point, but a minor to possibly moderate snow event from, say, central Pennsylvania all the way up through maybe Boston. And then behind that, some pretty cold air moving down. And some indications are this is going to be a brutal cold air mass, especially in the northern plains. But the cold air this cold air mass, it's probably going to drive pretty far south. And if you haven't run your heat yet, I know some places have it in the deep south, northern Florida, might want to make sure that's working, because I think you're going to need it sooner rather than later. But real quick, as far as that, we'll touch on this possible sneaky snow event real quick. And I'll zoom in here and you can see Pittsburgh. So this is Thursday into Friday night here of next week. So Pittsburgh over towards central Pennsylvania, Harrisburg area, up through northeast Pennsylvania, southern New York, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, up until coastal Maine. We have a swath there of 3 to 6 inches of snow. So noteworthy, especially because so many people will be traveling over the Thanksgiving holiday. So again, not a forecast at this point. It is a long ways out there. This snow map is not showing anything for, say, Philadelphia, New York. You're right on that border. So just some slight shifts. Obviously, you're going to have huge impacts. Right now, this is north and west of 95 until you get up into Connecticut and Massachusetts. But if this wobbles just a little bit further south, then we could be talking about Philadelphia, D.C., Baltimore, maybe not out of the question. So, again, stay tuned, and we'll be bringing more updates as far as that goes. As far as the weather pattern goes here, so this is 500 millibars. Now this weekend, our storm system on the east moves out. Our trough in the west is then replaced by a ridge. And so whenever you see this west coast ridge here, see this ridging, these brighter colors. So we have a positive P&A, and then we have ridging over Alaska and then to eastern Russia, parts of the Arctic there. So whenever those things line up, that is usually an indication that there's going to be pretty cold air mass moving south. And the ensembles, the long-range ensembles that we look for to forecast the weather in long range, they're all showing this, and they're all showing this pattern really kind of locking in. So as we get past our little storm system next week, so I think after this storm system moves out this weekend in the east, we're going to have a little bit of a moderation as we go into the middle part of next week, and then towards the end of next week and next weekend, the bottom really drops out and going to get pretty cold. And it looks like this is going to be a pattern that's going to have some staying power, and that's what we're looking at here on the ensembles as we see that big ridging the west coast. So that is just going to keep those reinforcing cold shots moving south into the United States. And this is now December 8th, and that pattern's still locked in there. So let's actually pull up the temperatures here so we can see the temperature response to this pattern. All right, so this is this weekend here. So we see some cold air across the southeast, some cold moving into the upper plains, and then we see it warm up in the central part of the United States moving eastward. So that's our moderation that we're talking about. But then look at all that cold air, those blues and those purples. So that's the cold air moving down behind that, and pretty cold too. And look at that, it's just very sustained, just pouring out of Canada, focused mainly east of the Rockies. I think the eastern two-thirds of the United States. They're the ones that are going to be really kind of in this colder than normal pattern. If you're out west, you're going to be fluctuating, I think, between normal, maybe slightly above to below normal. Not as sure bet, but as we're talking to the eastern two-thirds of the country, the way this pattern's setting up is look like as we end November here, go into December, it's looking like a pretty cold pattern. And then we'll just run this model out, and you can just see. So this is now December 8th, and you can see much of the country below normal. So this pattern looks like it's locking in. And then something we talked about last video, pulled up again, the MJO, which is a really big driver of the weather, has 8 phases to it. This time of year, phases 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 are pretty warm for the United States, for most of the United States. We're in the warm phases right now. So that tells me that with the warm phases of the MJO and a colder pattern setting up, this could be our base pattern. It says going into the winter. So all signs at this point pointing towards a pretty cold winter, I think, for many. Now that could change. So I'm really interested to see as we go into the second week of December, if we see an MJO response, if we see all of a sudden that pattern shift to a warmer pattern, then say, okay, the MJO is kind of taking hold again. But we're not seeing that at this point. So if we continue to see this cold pattern lock in the warmer phases, we're going to be entering the colder phases later in December. 7, 8, 1 as we go into January 2, still a pretty cold and stormy phase there. So that tells me, if this pattern stays locked in, then if we see the MJ go into phases 7, 8, 1, 2, we could be looking at a pretty cold first half of the winter. At least easy. That's what it's looking like right now. As we go into those other phases of the MJO, 7, 8, 1, 2, and that's really where we see storminess start to increase too, especially in the eastern part of the country. But that's how it looks like right now. Stay tuned. Going to update it as I see it happening. But that's it for now. Thanks for watching, and see you next